Hi everyone and welcome back. This is the part 4 of the video series, and in this video we are going to talk about Nest.js with the kafkajs. Okay, so in the last video we talked about Nestjs Microservices with the Kafka, where we were using the microservices provided by Nest.js with the Kafka transport. But there are two types of architecture. One way you can just use a Nest.js microservices where you create a gateway or the publisher, and then there is a consumer. And then there is another type of architecture. Let's say I have just a one service, which is just, and I'm not using Nestjs microservices. I just have some mechanism. When you hit an API, I post the data to the Kafka, and I'm using kafkajs library. So I'm not just, I'm writing my own native implementation. For integrating with the Kafka, I will be creating Kafka producer, Kafka consumer. Kafka producer will put the messages on the Kafka, and Kafka consumer will read the messages from the Kafka. So here we are going to create Nest.js reusable module, which contains a Kafka producer, Kafka consumer, and Kafka consumer will have a smart capability to retry the connection, reprocess the messages when there is a failure. So it's like a reusable package we are creating, which talks about maybe a simple Node.js with the kafkajs, because if you just remove the Nest.js classes, it's a simple Node.js with the kafkajs. We are going to have a simple Nest.js module where we will create a producer service, consumer service, and we will talk about this implementation end to end. So what we are going to do, three-step process. We are going to create a kafkajs library in the npm workspace. npm workspace we have already created, or you can refer my previous video how we are setting up npm Nestjs workspace. Then we are going to create we are going to see how we can connect to the Kafka using kafkajs library. We are going to create a Kafka producer, Kafka consumer, and we are going to check all the conditions, how to connect, how to disconnect, how to do the retries from the consumer side, how to publish the message to the Kafka in the right way using Kafka service. So we are going to create this reusable module in the Nest.js library. Okay, so let's get started. If you're watching this video, then I will recommend that also take a look on the previous video, because with that you will be able to understand the folder structure. It's like nothing rocket science. It's just a simple Nest.js workspace with the 3 different applications created. We are going to use the same structure. Here we are going to add a library in this Nest.js workspace. So there is a simple command which will help us to create a library, and Nest generate a library and library name Kafka. So it is going to create inside a lib folder, and okay, maybe I'm not creating it in the correct directory, and here I will be just generating this library. Okay, that is created. So this is a simple library we have created, which contains the Kafka module, Kafka service, and rest all the other things we will start adding here, because we want to create a Kafka reusable module which contains Kafka producer, Kafka consumer, Kafka producer service, Kafka consumer service. So how the overall structure looks like, that also we will talk about. I'm just creating the files here because this is going to be a Nest.js module. Consumer is responsible for connecting to the Kafka as a consumer. And here we have a consumer service.ts, and then there is a producer service.ts. One is a Nest.js service, one is just a simple class, producer injectable service and producer class, consumer injectable class, and consumer just ES6 class. And then we just create an interface like what is the format of the payload, producer interface, consumer interface, and then we'll talk about overall what is the plan. So this is our plan. What we are planning to do is we are going to create Kafka module. I'm going to create a Kafka producer injectable service, Kafka consumer injectable service, because those are part of the Nest.js ecosystem. But I'm going to use the simple ES6 classes for the producer and consumer, which will be used by Kafka consumer service or Kafka producer injectable service. Sorry for the mistake. And here we are going to, this producer and consumer are going to access the Kafka using kafkajs client. Kafkajs is really very important library. I have used other libraries also before this kafkajs, and they are really not good. First of all, they are in the native C and C++ and lots of issues with the Node.js versions. So if you are using kafkajs, that is the best thing you are doing to connect to Kafka using kafkajs client. So now this is the Nestjs part, I mean Nestjs module, which will contain the two different services, producer service and a consumer service. And we are going to create two ESX classes, producer class and the consumer class. And we are going to instantiate, we are going to create the object of those classes in the injectable services. I mean, I could have created the producer also injectable service, consumer also injectable services, but there is no such need. We already have a two injectable services with the Kafka module. Now, how we can create the instance of the producer using new producer, new consumer. And we are going to have a config service also. So I will create a config library because we need to pass the Kafka broker, Kafka topic name. I have here config service and config module. Now this config service will have some configurations and we should be able to access them. Important point here is I'm going to implement a retry mechanism for the Kafka consumer. Sometimes what happens is when new message comes, there can be failure due to unknown reason. So we should be able to implement a retry mechanism so that it can retry 3 times before say, okay, I cannot process this message. So what we are going to do, we are going to have a simple API. API will post the message to the Kafka, and then there is a Kafka consumer. So how we are going to post the message? We are going to use a Kafka producer. We already have a producer class, so we'll find a way. You will get an instance of producer dot maybe send this particular message, and then there is a consumer listening to the particular topic where the message has arrived. Then there we will implement a retry mechanism and processing the message. So first of all, I'm going to create this config module, config service. So I'm going to convert this config service to app config service and app config module because config service is already available in the Nestjs common and it conflict. So now we are going to, config service, what is the use? Config service is just to populate the environment variable. It just provide a way using which we can pass the environment variables. So here I'm using config module from Nestjs and I'm reading env.local or env file, config module.forroot. If the stage is local, then use env local, otherwise .env file. That is just a way to populate the environment variables. So config module import them. I think we have stage is nothing but environment variables, like we can have two different stage, local and development. And here we have two different environment file, env or env local. Okay, so I need to create those files. And those files are nothing but will contain, okay, what is your broker URL, localhost 9092, what is the Kafka topics, and any of the environment variables you wanted to manage that can be managed by this config module and config service. So this is the config module, env.local, it is reading for the local environment. And the objective of this config module is to, it is like same as .env module, populate things from configuration.env file to process.env. And this is my config service, app config service, and it is using this Nestjs config service. And here I will just provide a way to populate the values inside a .env. So here there is a method public get Kafka, because these are the two environment variables I wanted to get. So let's say somewhere in the code I wanted to get, know the Kafka broker. I'm not going to write process.env.broker. I have a config service which is app config service. So from app config service instance I can do .kafka.broker, app config service instance .kafka.topic. Right? Just a smart way of doing it instead of writing it. So this is the Kafka service. What I will do is, this is the injectable service I'm going to write here. This is the Kafka service, and this is, one is the producer and one is consumer. Just rename them. So this end-to-end, it is overall we are creating these injectable services, producer and consumer, and Kafka module. There we will import all these things. These are like a shutdown hook. So why I'm doing this? So whenever the application shut down, we also need to disconnect the Kafka connection to the producer. Producer will disconnect the Kafka client. Consumer will disconnect the Kafka client, right? That is important just for releasing the connections. And now inside a constructor, this is the Kafka consumer service, and then there is a Kafka producer service. So here we are injecting the config service which we have created inside a config library. Config service is app config service. Okay. And to have the config service inside a Kafka module, you need to import app config module because you are accessing a service. So obviously you need to import a module so that Nest.js won't complain about it, right? Then Kafka consumer service, Kafka producer service, also export them so that other feature modules can use the Kafka consumer and producer service. Now it's all about writing the code and making it end-to-end working. So in the producer service, we are going to use produce, and consumer service, we are going to write a consume methods or connect methods, all these utility helper methods. So here we are doing a Kafka producer and Kafka consumer produce methods. First of all, get producer. First of all, we need to get a producer instance, right? So we need to take care of connecting to the Kafka using kafkajs client and return the producer from the kafkajs client library. All those things we are going to do inside a get producer method. Here, I think we need to pass the topic name. So, I mean, to which topic you are going to connect, right? Let producer equal to this dot. I think we need to get an instance. So this dot producer dot get topic. Okay, let me just import the producers here. I mean, we can have multiple producers. So this is an array. This is just like a key value pair. I'm going to have map of all the producers which we have in the application. Map of key and value is iProducer implementation. This is an interface which contains connect, disconnect, and produce method, right? So we can just call producer.produce message. And here we are connecting to the topic. Topic you can get from the config service, this .config service.kafka.topic. Simple. Oh no, this is just a variable. And you can just pass this topic here. Get producer topic is of type string. Is.producer.get topic. So inside this map, I'm going to store the producers as a key value pair. Okay, for this topic, this producer, for this topic, this producer. So we are just maintaining the key value pairs. And then if we don't have the producer available in the map, then we are going to call the Kafka producer service. I mean, this map is really acting as a cache, right? So if now here I'm going to create a new producer for this particular topic, right? If this producer already exists, we will return it. Otherwise, we will just connect it. We will just get the Kafka producer and we will set it with the key value pair. So key is the topic and value is the producer. So this is simple, right? You can have multiple topics. You can publish the message to the multiple topics. So here we are just managing the key value pair in the map. So we are checking first if producer exists by doing get topic for this particular topic. No, then create a Kafka producer by calling the class, by creating the instance of the class which we are going to write, Kafka producer, which is going to use kafkajs, because here I didn't write any kafkajs in the Kafka producer service. I mean, this is the Nestjs service and there is a ES6 class. So here in the Nestjs service, we are not doing that. But in ES6 class, we are going to use kafkajs client library to return the producer to us. So here we are just doing simple producers and this producer Kafka producer.produce. Produce is already a method. And here I'm going to return the producer. There was a typo in the brackets. So let's add this producer class. Okay. Now Kafka producer service, it's nothing but a simple ES6 class which is going to use kafkajs. So let's get it finished as soon as possible. Here it implements the iProducer. So there are three different methods. We have connect, produce, and disconnect. Okay, what is disconnect? Disconnect means once the application is down, I mean once we are removing the application or stopping the application, you should be able to, the service should be able to call the disconnect method. And produce is nothing but producing the messages and sending the message to the Kafka. That is what produce will do. Disconnect, it is just going to use these are all async methods: async connect, async disconnect, and async produce. Inside constructor, we are going to pass the topic string and the broker. Okay, these things you will get from the another service because it's not an injectable service. First of all, it's just like a plain ES6 class private read only Kafka, and this is our Kafka producer. So these are just a private variables we are creating, and all these couple of methods are private. A producer, so this is the producer from the kafkajs, and private read only. Another variable is the logger. I mean, if you want to just log some messages, we can use the Nestjs common for the logging. And now we are going to create the kafkajs instance. So here new kafkajs. So we'll just write a Kafka. We need to import Kafka and just pass the object. Inside the object, what all configuration it needs? The broker, and broker is like, okay, whatever the broker we are passing from the configuration and the topic, right? So we got the Kafka instance, and so we need to also connect, right? We need to create a producer. This dot producer equal to this dot Kafka dot producer. You need to call it, and this will give us the producer, and just do the logging part. So this is how, using the constructor of this particular class, you will get a producer. And now produce, this dot produce dot I think send method is there to send the message. So to this particular topic I'm sending, and what is the message payload which I'm sending, that can be formatted here. This is the message. Inside an array we are sending the message, and then there is a simple disconnect. All these methods are there. Connect, this is inside a try catch, because there can be failure while connecting to the kafkajs using kafkajs. So await this dot producer dot connect. So this will happen first. First we are producer will connect, and then if there is any error, we can also try again inside a catch. Okay, this dot producer dot connect again after sleep of 5000 milliseconds. So sleep is nothing but a simple set timeout and resolve the promise after 5 seconds. So this is the connect. API disconnect is just nothing but a disconnecting the Kafka. This dot producer dot disconnect. Simple, right? Now this class is really important for our injectable class. Here we are going to import this, resolve everything. We got the producer from this, and we can do the connect. So you can see once you are able to connect here, we will get the producer, and then we will set a topic and all these information. So now if you look at overall topic, overall concept, what we are doing, now we are writing Kafka consumer. I copy paste the producer code. I will just change a couple of things here, because consumer will consume instead of produce, right? And in consumer you need to pass some runtime options. So this is my simple consumer. Kafka consumer implements I consumer, and there are a couple of methods like, okay, implement methods, connect, disconnect, and consume. Okay, constructor will act like the same. Here Kafka, new Kafka, and pass the broker. Instead of producer, here we will have a consumer. So this dot consumer equal to this dot Kafka, and this will be consumer equal to this dot Kafka dot. Do we have any method consumer? So this will give us the consumer, but here we need to pass the configurations, what to consume, what group ID I need to join, what topic information, and all these things. So that we can get from the argument which we are passing in this consume method. So there are a couple of argument we are passing from Kafka consumer injectable service, which is topic, configuration, and connection. Callback, which is on message. So here we have a couple of arguments: topic, config, and the broker information. Kafka consumer config. Okay, so what it will do is you need to pass the config. So this will give us the consumer, that's what I want, and this will be connecting to the topic with this group ID. Okay, the group ID we have, topic we have, and then it will start consuming the messages. And how to consume? First of all, we need to connect. So here on message is actually a callback event. So whenever you start consuming the message, through what method we are going to process the message. So that is on message, which we are passing as an argument, promise of type void. So this is the consume method, and what consume method will do is await this dot. First of all, I think consumer equal to consumer dot subscribe, because once the consumer is there, you can subscribe to a particular topic, this dot topic, and then this dot consumer dot run. That method will execute when you got a message on the consumer side and you are reading message one by one. So we are just running a loop. Here we can just run a simple loop. On message is a callback function we are executing, message and partition, And you can do lots of custom things here. This is where we are going to implement a retry logic. So what we are doing is, when you are consuming the messages, what happens is you will retry 3 times. And this is where we are connecting the consumer, this.consumer.connect, and disconnect this.consumer.disconnect. Simple. And here we will put things inside a try catch block, let's say, because you are reading a message and there are possibly some errors can occur, right? So here we are just installing all the required modules like async retry. That is just a mechanism using which you can run a loop. You can run promise 3 times in a single iteration. So here, if there is a failure, it will try to retry that 3 times. So retry, async retry, and there is a callback function. And inside a callback function, we are going to execute on message function. Right? There is a message function is there. On message we are executing, and retry is 3 times. On the retry, this is error while consuming the message. Retrying again, just like a simple library feature it is providing. And now handle the failure of the message, either store the failure message in the DL queue or database or somehow to track, okay, there is a failure in processing or consuming the particular message, and it is failing even after trying for 3 times. Okay, just import the Kafka consumer. In the Kafka consumer, we are passing, you can see, the topic, config, and the broker. I mean, in the consumer, we need to pass more argument like the topic, group ID, and the broker information. This is my current IP I got, because here we are using kafkajs. So important thing is, do not use localhost, right? We are using because Kafka is available on the host machine with this IP. It has advertised the Kafka on this particular IP, which is nothing but my machine IP, not localhost. And then 9092 and Kafka broker, Kafka topic. These are the 2 arguments. We will change these variable names to this.config.get Kafka broker and Kafka topic. Okay. Now this is the topic name, test topic, because here we are not using Nestjs microservice. We need to specify what topic you are actually producing the message and where we are consuming. So this is the Kafka module, which contains the producer and a consumer, right? So inside app module, what I will do is, because I need some mechanism to publish the message to the Kafka. So here, first of all, add the Kafka module, so that I should be able to use the producer service and consumer service inside the API gateway service. So there is we just added a Kafka library. Now we need to find a way to use the library. So I injected a Kafka module in the app module of API gateway. Here I can inject. So here I'm just creating a create Kafka test, and here I can inject a producer service, consumer service. All these things we can just pass Kafka producer service and Kafka producer service dot produce, or there are some methods produce. So here it inside a produce, I think we need to pass only the message which we are going to produce. So I will just pass a plain simple vanilla message. Okay, new, either you can just pass the create object or just send a simple payload. Now inside a payload is also of type JavaScript object. Let's convert into a string. Okay, this is producing. So we are already connected to the Kafka, right? And here we are doing post. So what we are doing is producer service dot produce. Producer service dot produce will also connect to the Kafka, make sure the connection exists, and produce this message. And here we are going to write a simple injectable service, maybe a test consumer, which keep listening to the Kafka and consume the messages. It implements the on module in it. What it is doing, it is just using the consumer service, consumer injectable service, and producer injectable service we already have. So we can take the advantage of both these services to produce and consume the messages. So we need to import a fconfig module because we are specifying the topics and all. Here we got the private read-only config service of app config service. And using config service, I can know what is the topic name, what is the broker URL you are passing. Await this.consumer.consume, right? On module init, on the initialization of module itself, we are started consuming the messages. Config, this is the group ID, and on message, this is the particular message we are going to execute on message. So we talk the message as a function, message as input, and this dot console.log whatever the message we got. This is the one way. Just pass the message dot value. So this is await. So we just need to make on module init method async, and this error will be resolved. And now we can start the application. So now what error we are getting when I hit this invalid test topic object payload. So we'll just try to pass this producer value. And try to pass the payload dot. So here you will get a message, and I will just try to log it console.log message whenever the message arrives. And then console.log message.value .toString. So the error is invalid message value. That means we are just passing the directly things. We just need to pass the value, and it can be a simple message object, but it needs to be passed with the value object. Produce value payload .toString. That will also work because we are converting the JSON object to stringified version. And here I can produce this. That means we can hit this endpoint and can put the messages to the Kafka. And here everything status code is 200. That means the message is going to the Kafka. Okay, this is the producer service. Producer is able to write the message to the Kafka. Then we can have a simple consumer. We already have the consumer service here. We just need to fix the code here. Consumer, right? This is the injectable test consumer this. But I think this consumer service is not added in the inside the app module. Until unless you don't add it, nothing will work, right? Test module, and we need to add the test module or test consumer only in the providers, not in the controllers. So let's take a look onto that. Here we got this thing. So this is how we are testing the implementation. So I'm just printing the value, whatever the value is coming from their side. It was showing object, so I'm just trying to stringify it. Payload.toString. But I'm going to produce a simple message. I don't want to complicate it with the object value equal to my name is Taro. Okay, this is what you are sending to Kafka, and then there is a consumer. Consumer will read this and at the gateway side, because consumer is also attached in the gateway service. There is a consumer.ts. You see there we have written the logic of the consumer. Okay, so this service is the logic, has the logic how to consume the message. It is passing the config test consumer. We have a Kafka topic, and whenever the message occurs, we are reading it through the on message callback hook. So this is overall about how can we use kafkajs with the maybe Node.js, maybe Nest.js. We are doing it with the Nestjs. We are not using Nestjs microservices. I want to just try how I can use kafkajs library to connect to produce the message and kafkajs library to consume. So there are some vanilla ES6 classes which we are creating object inside the injectable services. But overall, this can be used as a visual module, and you can start using this. I will push the code to the GitHub, and stay tuned for the next topics.